All right. Let's pop out the chat so I can see it. There we go. Cool. Let's see here. Feisty Crabman, how you doing? It's bright and sunny in Newark, Delaware. I should turn my face cam on, shouldn't I? Hi, how you doing? Hope you're doing well. Showery Edinburgh. Let's see here. Humid St. Albans, UK. The lovely Pre-Nova, Washington, D.C. How you doing, Fungazi? Hello from Fort Wayne, Indiana. I'll be there in early September at a trade show. Let's see here. Not so humid Tennessee. Well, that's kind of nice. Hi from Townsville. How you doing? South Florida, which is hot and humid as would be expected for sure. Threatening to rain, Peninsula in the UK. BF Bulldog, how you doing? Humid Oklahoma. I haven't been outside yet, so I don't know if it's humid or not, but it's probably, I mean, it's not going to get real hot today, so it might be humid. J Solo Arts, how you doing? Toronto, Clearwater, Florida, Kent, England, cool and cloudy Ottawa. Best wishes from Germany, how you doing? North Carolina, Markham, Quebec, Los Angeles, Lexington, Kentucky. I'll be in Lexington, Kentucky next year for the GAMA trade show, the Game Manufacturers Association trade show. It's going to be held in Kentucky for a bit. Rhode Island, Saskatchewan. Always fun to say Saskatchewan. Humid Germany. Doing my taxes right now. Well, you know. Whiskey Lucan. I'm not sure what Whiskey Lucan is, but it sounds like fun to say. Portugal. At least I think it's Portugal. There's no T in it. Portugal? Maybe it's a misprint. I'm not sure. Rochester, Minnesota, Boston, counting down to Nova. Me too. End of this month, yeah. And then I'll be home for like 3 days, and then I have to go to Fort Wayne, Indiana for a trade show. Peterborough, UK, where I'm turning an old Primaris Apothecary into a Dark Apostle. Ooh. San Diego, Kent, checking in from South Ontario, Isle of Wight, sunny Milwaukee. How you doing, Jesse? Lake District. Bumped into Jesse at one point at Gen Con, actually. Quebec. Let's see here. Cloudy SoCal. Well, it's got to be cloudy there sometimes. Gamma is cool. Wish it was more public facing, but I get it. Yeah, I get that. Kelly, how you doing? Hello from Denmark. How you doing? Australia. Gamma is moving to Kentucky. Yeah, it's been in Reno for quite a while, and they were going to move it to Kentucky, I think, pre-pandemic. The plan was to, well, I think actually 2021 was supposed to be the first year it was in Kentucky, and then of course it got bumped, and then they still did one, like the one this year, 2023, was still, I think it was the last one that was in Reno. So yeah, now it's going to Kentucky. 87 and humid. It's 9 o'clock there in Texas, and it's already 87 and humid. That is no fun. Moist Tennessee. Hail from the land of mountains and salt. There you go. Hello from Sweden. Cleveland, Spain. Let's see here. Yorkshire. Hope you're doing well. Checking in from Nova and hoping no con crud got you. No, I came back completely fine. No, nothing. No cold. No, I mean, some aches and pains, but that's just from walking a lot more than I'm used to over the course of 5 days. But that's gone away now too. But yeah, I seem to have been fine, so that's good. Hello from the Philippines, Leicester, Hamilton. A Gen Con vendor room looks like a wallet destroyer. Yeah, well, actually, in the title card, that's actually a gaming area. That's not the vendor room. You can tell because the floor is concrete. But yeah, that's actually the one of the big, huge, probably the biggest of the giant gaming. Well, I was gonna say the biggest of the gaming rooms, but honestly, the football field next door is probably the largest of the gaming rooms. They turned the entire football field that the Indianapolis Colts play on. They put this stuff on it, this plastic, like these plastic boards that lock together. Then that entire area is probably the large. Well, maybe not. That's only 100 yards by however wide a football field is. It's probably that room that's in the thumbnail is actually a good deal larger, but it's not one big room. It's sort of like, it's kind of L-shaped, and it's got some, anyway, but it's pretty big. Square footage, I'm sure it's bigger. I have a dark confession, but some people just like that kind of thing, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Honestly, if that's the case, you might like the Cyberpunk Red Combat Zone. The reason why I'm okay with the dice in Cyberpunk Red Combat Zone is that they are just normal dice. They've just been customized. Now, that sounds weird, but what I mean is, like, how like with Star Wars X-Wing and stuff like that, sure, it's an 8-sider or a 10-sider or whatever, but it's got all these weird symbols on it and all that kind of stuff. They give you custom dice in the Combat Zone box, but they're just like a green 10-sider, and it goes from like 1 to 10, like a normal one, but it's not like they just bought it. They're custom made. They have like custom cyberpunky looking numbers and stuff like that and whatever. So yeah, you could just, if you wanted to, use regular dice, but they've given you some cool looking dice, but they don't have weird symbols on them particularly and stuff like that. They are, still regular dice. And there's also little plastic rulers in there too. But again, they're not weird shapes or anything like that. They're just, you could, use a regular ruler if you needed to. So many steps at Gen Con this year. Oh yeah. Lots of walking. Not sure I am so excited about Gamma moving. Not like I'm going, just interesting. I've never been to Lexington, so that'll be something. I will miss Reno a little bit, but I got to be honest, I won't miss trying to fly into Reno. The last couple of times I went to the Reno trade show for like, my day job and stuff like that, it was like, we were not flying first class, but it was still a $1,700 ticket per person. It's just because you can only fly into Reno, I think, if you fly into Vegas first, or maybe SLC. I don't know. It's real weird to get there. Like, it's one of those places in the country where you cannot get there direct almost, basically, unless you're like right next door, and then what's the point? So yeah, it's every time we were trying to fly there, it was a real pain in the rear. So anyway. Working on finishing up some pieces before Nova. I am also working on that slowly. Any game con or any nerd gathering can demolish a wallet if you aren't paying attention. For sure. Oh, yeah. Walking those hard concrete floors is debilitating after a few hours. I actually bought new shoes that are designed, well, they're not designed for walking. They're like, technically, I guess, running shoes, but they're very light and they're nice and squishy. They're old man New Balance, tennies and whatnot. And I bought those like a month before the convention. And I was very glad that I did, because otherwise, if I would have worn my normal, like, no support having like Van slip-ons, I would have died, like straight up croaked. Irregulars next weekend? I'm 98% sure. Yeah, because it'll be the 19th. So Irregulars live for the Patreon folks is next weekend, Saturday. 53.5 yards wide. No kidding. Tried out several of my 20-year-old pants from my childhood. There are acrylic and some definitely have cottage cheesed up. Oh, wait, what? Paints. I think you meant paints there. I think there was the word paints, because I don't know how your pants have gotten cottage cheesed. That's, there you go. I get you. Yeah. Still can't find a seller for Cyberpunk Red Combat Zone in Australia. I think it did just kind of come out, so it might take a bit. What I would do is I would email, there's probably a contact email over at their website, the Monster Fight Club, and see if they know who they're going to be distributing through in Australia, or if they will be. I'm assuming they will be, but we don't know. But like I said, I think it just came out to the general public. I think it's maybe just going to be hitting stores soon. I think Gen Con, because it got to the Kickstarter people, and then they brought it to Gen Con, and then I'm suspecting it's going from there. I love the Combat Zone set, but some of the details in the minis are really janky. The minis aren't GW minis. I'll be perfectly honest. I was building the Tiger Claws this weekend. And they go together pretty well for the most part. And they're not usually too many pieces. It's usually arms and a head. Like the torso and the legs are all one part. But they're not, I mean, I was thinking about it. they're not as fancy as GW models, but on the other hand, that entire box, 2 forces of 6 models each, the board, the terrain, the cool shipping container, the dice, the instructions, the rulers, all the cards and all that kind of stuff, costs less than a Imperial Knight. And when I say less than, I mean $50 less than. It's $120 versus Imperial Knights these days I think are $170. So for that extra $50, you could buy another squad. I think the thing that we get into sometimes, and I know I do this myself, we get into this where we're like, well, it's not as, the models aren't as good as GW. And you're like, yeah, but that GW model costs $45 for a single person. Ursula Creed is $45 for a lady that tall. Doesn't make any sense, right? So when a company makes something that's maybe not as good, but it's also considerably cheaper, those are kind of your options. And I don't think the models are that bad. They've got some kind of iffy mold lines, I'm not going to lie. But, it is what it is. It just takes a little bit extra time to grind them out. And there's only 6 guys per squad, or 6 people per squad. So it's not, I don't know. I know what you mean. Like, they're not GW models, but they're also easier to build. If those would have been GW models, they would have been made up of, instead of, say, 4 parts, a head, 2 arms, and a torso / leg, they would have been 9 parts apiece, probably. And I've been building Imperial Guard, Cadian Shock Troopers, so yeah, I know what I'm talking about there. Ugh. Have you checked out The Doomed from Osprey? It looks like a fast and versatile game. I picked it up at Gen Con, not bought it, but picked it up and looked through it. It looked more dense than I expected. There's a lot going on in that book, and so I ended up not buying it. But I did see it. I think it's for sale as well as on a PDF. I think the PDF is still available on Wargame Vault. Let's go take a look, shall we? I'm going to push that button. I'm going to push this button, and we're going to go to Wargame Vault. Yeah, there it is. It's currently behind Majestic 13. How weird. Even though they have a giant ad up here that for the Doomed, and yeah, it's good. They don't have, that's weird. They don't have a medal yet for like sales. So we've got, what have we got? We've got platinum. That's weird. All right, well, because I would think they would have at least had a copper by this point. Because I think it goes copper, and then it goes to copper, silver, electrum, gold, something else, then platinum, then mithril, then adamantium. I don't remember exactly the scale. Anywho, but yeah, so I could definitely see using those models, the new scavengers and stuff like that from for Stargrave, from North Star Minis is the name of the company I'm trying to grasp for. Yeah, they would be good at that too. I think would be great for those. I've not gotten much painted this vacation, mostly because the wife had the time off too, so we've been busy doing stuff. Well, that happens. Usually I have a week or two alone with the dog to paint. Well, that sounds fun, but sometimes you got to do stuff too. Let's see here. Didn't realize Nova was actually in DC. Shouldn't call it Nova anymore. Northern Virginia Open. I know that's right, because they moved it from Northern Virginia to technically DC. So now it should be called DC Open, I suppose. I don't think they're going to change the name though, but yeah. Yeah, it's a new location. So it'll be interesting because I've never been to this new location. And so yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm going to have a good time, I'm sure, this year. I always enjoy going to Nova. It's a good group of folks, especially the new folks who've taken over are also very super nice too. It was nice to meet them last year. New Balance aren't for old men. I have some. Wait, I know. Can you fit stuff in the shipping container? Yeah, it's like IKEA, right? It's all flat pack. So then when you want to set it up, you just take the top, and then there's the bottom, and then you put the sides into it, and the front and the back, and the doors actually work, and then you put the top on top, and they just kind of fit together. And then you kind of have to pop it apart to get it back if you want to go flat again. But then the bottom of the shipping container as well has the ability to snap onto another shipping container. So it's not just like sitting there, it's actually sort of snapped in, kind of like Legos. So yeah, the shipping containers are pretty cool. This is the box of because the black one comes in the Combat Zone game, but you can also buy these separately where you get 5 of them: the red, the blue, the green, the gray, and the black. And I think this was $50. So so yeah, that's kind of nice too. If you saw the video that I did, like the YouTube short, they had hundreds of them all over the place, and they had them on this big cool like boat, like a like a shipping container boat or whatever you call this. And they're going to be selling that boat. I think they're going to be doing a Kickstarter for it. It's all laser cut. It's not MDF, it's HDF. It's the fancier, harder stuff, I guess. And then it's got a whole bunch of 3D printed parts and all kinds of jazz like that. So they're not going to just make it and have it for sale. It's going to be a Kickstarter thing because they're only going to make as many as they need, I guess, which makes sense because it looks like it's massive. It is. It's huge. Because John, who's the president, and I are in the same age range, he's like, it's like that USS, I think it was called the USS Flag. What was the 6-foot-long aircraft carrier for G.I. Joe back in the 80s that we all wanted, but very few of us ever got? This is how you catch up with that now as an adult. You go, now I have this boat, which is nearly the same thing, I suppose. It's cheaper than a Kill Team launch box or a Combat Patrol. Oh, good point. Yeah, you're right. It's $40 cheaper than regular Combat Patrol. That's true too. Hiking boots are what I usually wear for conventions. I need the ankle support. I think my ankles are okay. Did I miss any talk on Cyberpunk Red Combat Zone? So glad I backed the Kickstarter. Just mentioning that it's cheaper than a lot of things over at Games Workshop, I guess. Good point on model quality versus price. I've switched to Wargames Atlantic for all non-power armored sci-fi infantry. Quality is not quite as good as GW, but it's still great and the price is better. Yeah, I think the models are great. But you're right, they're not. I mean, like GW does make probably the best models in the world as far as miniatures are concerned. But there's also a very high premium on the cost, so we just have to take that into consideration when you look at something like Wargames Atlantic, which makes really interesting characterful models, which is hard to say. You usually get 20 to 24 of them for $35, something like that. That's a pretty good deal. And in most situations with Wargames Atlantic, you will get more heads than you will ever use. Like you will get a box that has 20 or 24 models inside, maybe 30. Maybe they have some that have 30, but I don't think so. I can't remember off the top of my head. But you will get 100+ heads in that box. So you have so many options, and once you've built those models, you've just got a whole bunch of heads that you can put into a little thing, and then anytime you need a special head, you can just reach in there and pull it ahead. You've got lots of heads, basically. Buy 2 or 3 boxes from them and you'll have all the heads you ever need ever. So, yeah. Good morning from Milwaukee. How you doing? Hope you didn't get hit by the con crud this year. Nope. My wife and I are still recovering from this year's flavor of con plague. Yeah, no, I haven't had any issues. I had a little tiny sniffle, but I'm pretty sure that was just my normal, allergies and such. Have you checked out Mobile Arms from Black Site Studios? Fast-paced mech battle. I've heard of it, but I have not looked at it. Let's see here. From what I've seen of the Cyberpunk Combat Zone models, they are very reminiscent of Papsical's miniatures on MMF. You could probably replace them if you wanted to, maybe, A lot of Monster Fight Club models look better than GW models, but too much of the range is heroic scale with ham hands and pumpkin heads, while GW is getting better. Cyberpunk gameplay seems awesome, though. They have definitely a larger scale. They're definitely heading into 32 millimeter range. I don't feel like they're scaled necessarily as far as like their heads and all that kind of stuff. Honestly, I thought the heads and the Tiger Claws folks were, in some situations, maybe just a touch small, maybe. I don't know. The Maelstrom people are all huge and chunky, but that's because they are like Maelstrom as a gang. That's all they do is like basically, cyber up everything and get huge. It's like steroids and cyber. That's all they're into. So those models are actually quite large, but the rest of them so far that I've messed with, like I said, the Tiger Claws seem, if anything, the models all seem a little tall, but not too bad. I think they're so far so good. I've been pretty happy with them. There is one of the Tiger Claws that is a shorter woman, and she's got does she have a knife or a big gun? I forget what, but she's so yeah, they are varying things to some degree, I think. If you live in that area, it's still considered North VA. Gotcha. Imagine if they changed the name of Gen Con every time it had moved. True. So Gen Con is called that because it's short for Geneva Convention. So the Geneva Convention was a thing from, I think, World War II, or was it World War I? I thought it was World War II. That was like a convention in Lake Geneva, Switzerland, where they got together to decide what the laws and rules were for war. So that's kind of what, that's a very high level. I don't really know the in depth, but that's what it's about. But that convention took place in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. So they just called it initially, for the first couple of years, they just called it the Geneva Convention because and they were all military modelers, and that was kind of the inside joke. And eventually got shortened to Gen Con, and then there you go. Let's see here. I have a couple of shipping containers, and I need this absolutely. I just noticed that my closed captioning was on the person that's weird. Anyway. Now I've lost the chat. There it is. It's back. I also found a Call of Duty Lego set at a Dollar General that had shipping containers the exact same size. No kidding. I loathe IKEA dishware. Oh, that's a bummer. US flag. Yep. I think it was the flag. Yep. It's the white whale for many an 80s kid. Oh, yeah. Well, for sure. No, I had a friend whose parents were very well-to-do, and they bought him a lot of different things, but they never bought him the flag. He always wanted it, and they were always like, First of all, because it's like 6 feet long. Like, where are you going to put that? Kids have to start sleeping on that thing. Honestly, they should have sold a mattress set to go on top of it, and then some sheets and stuff like that that had G.I. Joe junk all over them, and then that would have been an extra thing right there. Nothing compared to the Valiant Space Station. Best toy ever made. Wow. My midlife giant toy crisis ended up in me buying a Lego knockoff Super Star Destroyer. Close to 20,000 pieces for less than $400. It's stupidly huge. That does sound big. 20,000 pieces is a lot. Thought about getting the ones from Tinker Turf, but I was worried about them getting damaged. Wood solves this mostly. Sure. Well, these are not wood. Just FYI, these are plastic, so they're pretty strong. I swear GW prices based on what it can do in the game versus the cost. I hate that mentality, competitive pricing, and get them out the door. Yeah, I mean, I made a video, probably the most popular video on my channel ever, was about the secrets of Games Workshop's pricing structure. And a lot of people in the comments are like, they base the price off of the points. So if this is a model that has a lot of points to it, it has more, versus, because right now, if you look at it, if you take the Ursula Creed model from the Imperial Guard line, she's $45 for a single figure. Most of their single figures have been $35. They've been starting to edge into $38, even sometimes a $40. She's $45. And she's a good figure. She's a great sculpt, don't get me wrong, but I just don't. Anyway, for $5 more, you can get 10 entire Cadian shock troopers. So it's kind of weird. It's more than kind of weird. 20 troopers in my troopers box and a choice between 76 heads from North Star. Oh yeah, brilliant for kit bashing and customization. Yeah, like honestly, right now between the Stargrave minis and a bunch of sci-fi minis from Wargames Atlantic, like we are absolutely spoiled for choice these days. It's great. Morning from Columbus. Weather is finally awesome. Well, that's good. Originally located in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. It's true. Have you tried the Artist Opus dry brushes you picked up yet? Not since not as of yet. I haven't done, other than on Twitch, I haven't done any painting lately. When the hobby stuff I was doing yesterday was building. I bought a full set of the Artist Opus brushes, just can't bring myself to paint on them yet, still sticking with makeup brushes. I can understand that. Oh, 52 miniatures, how you doing? I would tell you that these brushes, these Artist Opus brushes, are not what you should use for dry brushing, which sounds weird because they're Series D for dry brushing, but they're really not. I honestly think that you are better served with cheap makeup brushes for dry brushing. Like last step, you've worked on this model or you've worked on this piece of terrain, you get yourself a dollar store makeup brush that's nice and soft with synthetic crappy bristles, and you go to town, and it works great. These are natural hair brushes, number one, and so that means they'll hold on to moisture a little bit better. Watch some videos on their YouTube channel, honestly, because what they're really trying to push there is that these are really good brushes for like this blending. You get this like airbrush effect without an airbrush, right? So that's really like, it's kind of like smushing at first to kind of stipple and get it into places, and then blending it and doing all this kind of stuff. Ross from Fohammer said he's going to be doing a video soon that's going to be like a very in-depth but like beginner focused, like this is how you do it. But there's some stuff on their YouTube channel right now with Byron that shows you how to use those brushes, and it's not really for dry brushing, but it's kind of like the old Secret Weapon washes. They were really actually glazes. Like the owner of the company, Justin McCoy, told me they're glazes really, but if I call them glazes, people won't buy them. So we have to call them washes because people don't know what a glaze does, but they know what a wash does. And they'll mess with it a little bit and be like, oh, okay, this is just a thicker wash. I'll use it differently. And then they get the idea of it. So really, those are glazes, but not washes. But they call them washes because, and same thing here. They're going to be like, they're dry brushes because they can't come up with a good word yet for smushing in and then blending and using the brush a little bit wet, but not dry. And there's not like a good, short, easy word for that. So yeah. Better than a race car bed. That would be pretty cool. When can we expect some Combat Patrol content? Can't you tell I'm excited about this game? I got to build them and paint them first. So like I said, I was working yesterday on Tiger Claws. I think I've got one more model to finish, or did I get them all done? I think the last model, I need to go back and maybe throw a little bit more glue underneath the feet just to make sure he's not too, the boots on the last guy have got a little bit of a, how you sometimes see cowboy boots or any kind of boots where they're flat, but then they also got that maybe that like kind of up. This is like yeah. So he's not touching as much of the base as I would like. So I need to go back in there now that it's all dry and kind of just throw a little bit extra glue in there, and then and then I'll start working on the Maelstrom guys and go from there. Let's see. Would you visit Adepticon? Oh, I go to Adepticon every year. Max that made Turnip 28 may be there this year. Oh, that'd be great. I'd love to. I've chatted with Max a couple of times online, like on Discord and stuff like that. Max, I love the stuff that he's doing with Turnip 28. I really does hope he gets to make it to Adepticon. I'd like to meet him. That would be great. I will be there. I saw your short about Star Wars Shatterpoint from Gen Con. What's your thoughts about the game? I'm not a fan of the scale. I don't like 40 millimeter, personally, especially since I have a whole bunch of Star Wars usable terrain that is not in 40 millimeter scale because it was designed for Legion. The game, I did a demo of it at Adepticon. I think I overall like the gameplay better than I like Marvel, that gameplay, but it's still, the scale thing. And also I'm not super into the Clone Wars stuff. Like I don't hate the movies. They're fine, whatever. But they've got this very Clone Wars kind of cartoon sort of look to the sculpts. And that's also a thing I'm not super into, so. Fabulous secrets were revealed to me the day I subscribed to Tabletop Minions. I have the power. I mean, you're not wrong. There, Axe and Axe. I wonder what kind of distribution Monster Fight Club has. Well, I shall find out. At least ACD. I'm pretty sure ACD they're distributed through, but I don't know if they're distributed through Alliance. I think initially they were, and I think that, I swear to God, for some reason in my head it sticks that they're no longer distributed through Alliance, but they're distributed through ACD, but I could be wrong on that. ACD is based out of Madison, Wisconsin. Alliance is based out of Fort Wayne, Indiana. But I don't know what exactly is going on there. I guess GW also has to look at how many are likely to sell, and the R&D has to factor into that. Oh, sure. I mean, I'm not one of those people that's like, well, it only costs like 4 cents in plastic to make these models, and so therefore you should only sell it for 4 cents. That doesn't make any sense. Obviously, tons of money went into the design. Like they had to pay designers to work for a long time to make these amazing models. And then they have to be tooled properly. Well, there's all kinds of stuff even before you get into tooling on the molds, like knowing how to break it all apart. And there's so much work that they put into it. Don't get me wrong. But it still seems sometimes like they're cranking that price up way above what it needs to be. But that's their choice. That's why we live in the world we live in. And so it's up to you whether you want to pay it or not. That's the way it works. Had a blast at Gen Con this year. Picked up the board game Last Light, and it's incredible. That's cool. I don't think I saw that anywhere. When I worked at GW, I was told the price was based on how many of X someone would need to buy, hence more expensive characters. You'd only need to buy one. Yeah, that sort of is kind of like points, but yeah, I can get that. Let's see here. Finally made it again to one of these shows. Wahoo. Well, absolutely, Ben. I'm glad to have you. Is Wargame just STL, or you can have them printed for you? Wargame Atlantic, they do have an STL thing, like tier, that you can do, but they also sell hard plastic minis, like on sprues and the whole deal. If you take a look at Wargames Atlantic, well, let's take a look at Wargames Atlantic, shall we? That button, and then, nope. Yep. Wargames Atlantic. We go here. So here's some 1916 to 1918 British infantry, and they are pre-order now. Here's the models that I used for Majestic 13. They're called Ura. And they're this kind of vaguely sci-fi. They remind me a little bit of the Colonial Marines from the Aliens movies. A little bit. I think that they could use slightly better photography over here. I should really chat with them about that. But they're really cool models. They come with lots of different heads and all kinds of stuff like that. And they come on sprues like this. So yeah, they're regular hard plastic models. Now, that being all said, they do have a digital thing where you can be like, oh, I'm interested in Death Fields, which is their kind of sci-fi stuff, right? So they have all kinds of different models and stuff and things that you can then buy the STLs and then print them yourself. I don't know that they sell printed STLs, like 3D printed stuff. You might have to find somebody to print it for you or something like that. But yeah, they have all kinds of, here's evidently frog people. That's kind of cool. Look at these frog folks. That's not something you find everywhere. So anyway, yeah, that's I think pretty interesting. But they're hard plastics. They've got historical stuff. They've got sci-fi stuff. They got fantasy stuff. They got a box of lizardmen that they sell who have swords and shields, but they also have the ability to carry AK-47s and I think gas masks. So they got a lot of cool stuff going on there. But they do both. And so does Anvil Industry. Anvil Industry doesn't make hard plastic models. They do all poured resin, but they also have a digital kind of, you can buy STLs from them as well, and, that kind of stuff. So, let's see here. I met Santa, got me the G.I. Joe Firebase. Santa thought all the figures in the box came with it, even so many years. Sure. I had a decent amount of G.I. Joe stuff, too. Looking at finally pulling the trigger on an airbrush compressor, looking at the Iowata, but 500 seems steep. That does seem steep. Goodness gracious. There are cheaper compressors you can get. Especially if you're just starting out, it may not be a bad idea to go take a look on Amazon, honestly. Or just, yeah, I think the compressor that I bought that I've used for years and years and years now, I think retailed for $350, and that was on the high end. And I had it was from Hobby Lobby back when they used to have this 40% off coupon that you could use on one item. And I went in there and bought my airbrush from them and got 40% off. And then you only do it once per day. And then I came in the next day and bought the compressor for 40% off. But yeah, no, $500 seems real high for a compressor. That better be a real fancy one. What does Majestic 13 offer that Space Station Zero and the Rain in Hell solo campaign don't? I think that one of the things that offers is the different style of gameplay, in that you are playing against, generally it's a very asymmetrical game in that you have always your 5 models, your team, and you go up against, in many situations, a single opponent. Like most of the missions, other than the special missions, are usually you against one monster, which is a very powerful monster. So it's a different kind of gameplay that way. Also, you don't ever have to worry about and you get this sometimes where in, let's say, Space Station Zero, you lose a team member, a crew member, is it the proper term? And then all of a sudden, it gets harder and harder and harder to play. In Majestic 13, if you lose a team member, well, next game you play, they come back because you have clones back at the base. Now, it may not be a perfect clone. It may be slightly freezer burned or something like that. Or, there's all kinds of different things that happen in between games. If you have to get a clone, if your person actually croaks and they can't be brought back, then you have a clone. So you don't have to make a new model, which is honestly behind the scenes. That's part of it too, is that I've never wanted to make the game where, okay, so now you've brought a new person back in, so you probably ought to maybe make a new model if you want to be really cool, because this guy's different and so the whole idea of just oh, it's a clone, then you can just use the same model over again. You're like, oh, this is a clone of, Dave or whatever. But like I said, there's a chart you roll on where maybe the clone isn't quite the same, and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think the main things honestly are the asymmetrical kind of aspect to it. Secondly, how am I trying to say this? Space Station Zero had that sort of branching narrative where you played challenge one, and then you rolled a die to see which one the next one was. But then when you played this one and finished it, maybe you don't roll a die, maybe you get to choose. So it's got this sort of branching narrative, sort of choose your path sort of situation. With Majestic 13, you're rolling randomly. So you do mission 1, mission 2, and then I think mission 3 is a special mission that's actually in the book. But 1 and 2 are just basically rolling on charts to see what you're going to do. So there's a lot more variability, let's say. With Space Station Zero, you're kind of moving down a path, but you might play through the entire game, get all the way to the end, and then do it again and take different paths, but they are all known paths. Whereas with Majestic 13, other than the special missions, which are generally every 3 missions, the 3rd mission, the 6th mission, the 9th mission, the 12th mission, etc., those other in-between missions are all random. So it's a very different kind of gameplay style as far as that's concerned too. And the solo campaign for Reign in Hell is only 6 missions, and you play them in order, and it tells a story. So there's that too. Let's see here. Have you mentioned anything about Cyberpunk Red Combat Zone at Gen Con? Yeah, just was talking about how it is $40 cheaper than a combat patrol, and it is $50 cheaper than an Imperial Knight, and things like that. Because someone mentioned that the miniatures aren't, super crazy awesome, like maybe say some GW stuff was, but again, the entirety of all of the game is considerably cheaper than a lot of things that GW orders. So there's that too, or offers. Sorry. I spent $700 on my Iowata compressor. Holy cow! Oh, geez, wow! I had no idea. I guess I haven't priced compressors in a real long. Ooh, wow. Freezer burn. Yes, that's a box called Cannon Fodder. Oh yeah, they've got 2 boxes of Cannon Fodder, because there's Cannon Fodder ladies and men, because they're like in jumpsuits. So the idea is that you can use them as you could paint them orange and say, these are all prisoners that have been sent out with a gun to go shoot the bad guys. And if they don't make it, it's okay. But you can also use them as people wearing jumpsuits, which is why I bought a box of them, because I'm using them for Space Station Zero, because I wanted my shipping crew for Space Station Zero to look like they're in jumpsuits, if let's say that, UPS or FedEx made you wear an entire jumpsuit instead of just the jacket and the pants or whatever. You can kind of do something like that. So it'll take a little bit of kit bashing, but not too much. Monster Fight Club was at this year's HMGS Historicon convention, and I bought more terrain from them. Great deals at the show. Yeah, they've also, another great thing that they've got too is they've got these chain link fences, which I've bought a bunch of too, which you can't find most places. So again, I like the fact that they're like, look, this is missing in the industry, so we'll just make it, and I kind of like that. That's a good thing. Sparmax and Iowata are the same, by the way. I have a Sparmax TC2000. I could be wrong on that. Maybe it's just a T2000, but I thought it was a TC2000. I think T stands for totally cool. Totally cool 2000. I could be wrong. Paying for the brand, but Sparmax is owned by Iowata. No kidding. I'll be darned. Morning, Adam. I apologize if you already asked what was the weird... What was that tech weird news YouTube channel you watched? You mentioned on last Friday's Twitch stream. Internet Today. That's the name of the channel. You should check that out. Internet Today. It's to Ricky and Elliot are the two guys that do the news. Been using the Timber Tech compressor for years. I've not heard of that one. Like when I first started, honestly, I used a compressor from like the hardware store, like a big red one that has an air tank. I think they call it like a pancake compressor or whatever. And I used that. It was like $60. And I used that for quite a while. It was very loud. It was very loud. Except when it filled up the tank. Like when you filled up the tank, then you'd be just airbrushing in complete silence. And you'd be like, oh, this is nice. And then the tank would get low and then it would kick in to refill and it would just be like, like really loud. So if you were okay with that, it was just fine. It worked great. Until it didn't. Then it stopped working one day but it was a $60 compressor. And I guess, I had it for a couple of years and eventually it stopped. And then I bought a regular compressor, which I've been using now for, oh gosh, probably at least 7 or 8 years, I bet. How do you feel about some of these portable wireless airbrushes? I bought one to try it out. It came with an airbrush and then this compressor that's like the size of like a Red Bull can that you screw onto the bottom and it's rechargeable and it's a little compressor. It's okay. Like it doesn't really give you the ability to change your PSI at all, so you don't really know what it is. Secondly, the airbrush that it came with didn't work. Like you couldn't stop it. Like I screwed it on there and then turned it on and it was immediately just like blowing air. And nothing that I could do could make it stop. So I just unscrewed it and then put my regular airbrush on there, which luckily it fit. And then that worked fine. It's not the greatest compressor, but it's okay. One thing though, one of my viewers, one of my Patreon folks, mentioned that he had one of those and he was charging it and it exploded because it's got lithium ion batteries in it, like your cell phone or like pretty much anything else that's rechargeable these days. And cheap lithium ions can explode. So he had it plugged in like in his living room or his kitchen or something or whatever, and it popped and it landed, I think, on fire in the chair that his sister had just been sitting in. Like she had just gotten up to go to the bathroom or to go get a snack or I don't know, whatever. And then when it landed, and after exploding, it landed in that chair. So my point is if you're going to get one of them, charge it, but keep an eye on it while it's charging. Don't just be like, oh, I'm going to charge this. I'm going to go to the grocery store, because you'll come home to potentially a mess. So that's the one thing. When you buy something super cheap, like those airbrush compressor things with the airbrush, I've seen them for as cheap as $50 or $60 online. Those batteries aren't great, probably. So that's something to be wary about. So anyway, yeah, just FYI. Maybe charge it outside in the driveway. That might not be a perfect idea either. It might rain. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure, but just keep that in mind when you're looking at one of those. Have I understood it correctly if I think that Majestic 13 doesn't have list building, just pick a crew and go? No, it does. I mean, you always have 5. And that's just because part of Majestic 13, the organization, it's part of their bylaws, is that all teams, when they go out, are only 5. No one knows why. It's from back in the 40s when it was first started. But yeah, it's always 5. The number is always 5. 6 is right out. And but you roll to see like your stats and stuff like that on your different people and stuff. So there is some list building that way. And then obviously there's weapons you can add and things like that. And so, yeah, there's crew creation is definitely part of the game. But once your crew is built, then, you go along. But if you're playing a campaign, they can kind of get beefed up and they can get skilled and they can get XP and things will happen. And so they can get better and better weapons and better gear and stuff like that over the course of the campaign. Can you remind us of which line of airbrush paints you favor? Army Painter. Army Painter air paints are, that's all I use in my airbrush anymore. I used to use I used to mix things down. Like I used to mix some of the paints that I would use down, try to get them to about like a skim milk kind of consistency, so I could shoot them through my airbrush. I also used to use Vallejo air a decent amount, but now with the release of the Army Painter air paints are so good, and they come in these great triads. So when you're like, I need to make a bunch of, let's say, red Space Marines, right? Well, you don't just spray them red. You start out and you give them an undercoat, some sort of primer. And in this situation, let's say if we're talking about red, I would probably give them a dark brown primer. Monument Hobbies has a good primer called Black Brown or Brown Black. I think it's Black Brown. Anyway, spray, prime, great. Then you go and look at the red ones over, on your rack or whatever that you've set up. I bought one of those acrylic racks on Amazon that you screw to the wall. They use them in nail salons to put all the different nail pot colors and stuff like that in them, but they're perfect for, that's the dropper bottles and stuff like that. So, you look at those and you go, okay, well, if you buy the complete set from Army Painter, there are at least 2 that are red triads, but there might be 3. I don't know. But you pick your red triad, and then you have like your base, your mid, and your highlight. And you just pick 2, let's say, to do that. So you might go, okay, I'm going to go with the mid and then the high, or you're going with the base and then the mid as the highlight. And you just do a zenithal with whatever the first red is, and then you do a kind of a truncated, just hitting the top of the head and the top of the shoulder pads and stuff like that, kind of highlight with your second color. And everything looks great. The thing about triads, it's awesome, and you see this from Reaper. They do triads. You're seeing it from what's his name there, Duncan, Too Thin Coats. He's been doing triads. Is it helps you as the painter go, this is the base color and this is the matched lighter color, as opposed to you going through and going, well, this is kind of and this from another company, it's lighter, but you might find that the colors don't match properly or whatever, and it looks weird sometimes. And sometimes you want stuff to look weird. You're painting chaos stuff, you want it to look weird sometimes. But if you're not painting chaos stuff, having the right, like knowing that this is the exact hue, base, and this is the exact hue mid, and this is the exact hue light, that does really help a lot. So yeah, the Army Painter airbrush paints are my favorite. I powered my first airbrush with a spare tire. Got a good 20 minutes of exercise pumping up the tire before every session, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. I've heard about that. I'm using the compressor that came as part of a Masters brand starter kit, and it is tankless, which I know some folks dislike. The whole kit, 3 low-end airbrushes, the compressor, hose, and yeah, those Master airbrush kits are actually pretty decent especially for starting out. It's not the cheap lithium-ion batteries that can explode. All of them can if they don't have a charge controller. I suppose that's probably true. Well, then, yeah. But if there's not a charge controller attached to the doohickey, like this was literally just the one I've got. You just plug it into a USB thingy and then plug it into the side of and so there's no charge controller, but I bet you the charge controller is inside the battery compartment, and that's what's doing the controlling. And if it's a cheap one of those, then yeah, something like that. Been using a California Air Tools compressor for 5+ years. Got it at local Farm and Fleet for about $110. Designed for quiet operation. That's really all you really want, honestly. Stayed up way too late building terrain from Blackside Studios for Majestic 13 urban scenario, and I didn't have much modern. Well, now you do though, Jim Crimmins, because Blackside Studios, the benefit to those folks is that most of their stuff comes pre-painted. Like all the panels are already painted the color, so you can put them together. And if you really wanted to, you can go in there and just kind of weather things a little bit to make them look a little bit more realistic or whatever. But if you don't, they're at least not just brown, like the MDF color. So that's really nice about the stuff from Blacksite. Finally caught a live show. Feel like it's been about 6 months. Wow. Well, I'm glad to have you back. The problem I ran into with a cheap battery-powered airbrush was it was running out of power halfway through what I'm painting and trying to clean it out with no power. Oh, sure, I could see that, yeah. Honestly, it'd be nice if you could just plug in the battery-powered airbrush if you're not going anywhere. Like if you're not airbrushing while on the back of a motorcycle, like I don't know why you can't just be plugged into the wall. You know what I mean? Like make those little ones, but plug them into the wall. Sure, make it so you don't have to be plugged into the wall for reasons, but if you're plugged into the wall, you don't have to worry about it running out of juice. You know what I mean? That's the way I would look at it. I have an Iwata Neo that came with a tankless compressor and works very good. Well, that's cool. Iwata makes good stuff. I know a ton of different folks that use them for different hobbies. I use Iwata, like my main brushes are Iwata. I use an Eclipse, which is the HPCS or whatever, and then I do have a Neo as well. Mine can work while it's plugged in. Well, that's a good thing. I don't know if any, I mean, maybe some of them can't. I'm not sure, honestly, but yeah, that makes sense. I've been loving Blackside Studios stuff lately. Do you have any info about their new game, Mobile Arms? I'm into mech games with my kiddos. Steel Rift is great for a 10-year-old. I don't. I just heard about it recently, and someone mentioned it earlier here in the stream, but I just heard about it recently. What was I doing this? At some point this week when it was a nice day and it wasn't too windy and it wasn't too humid and whatever, I went outside and primed a bunch of terrain, specifically terrain that I'm going to be using for Steel Rift. So I'm looking forward to that. As far as Blackside Studios is concerned, while I was gone at Gen Con, Demon Ship showed up because I had ordered it. So Demon Ship is a single player, like super tiny micro game. It's played on a very, very small little board that you can either 3D print or they sell the board, or you can make it yourself if you wanted to. It depends on how you want to do it. But it's Demon Ship is a game written by Malev. Some of you folks might know Malev Shinobi from here, well, mostly on Twitch and things like that and other stuff. But yeah, so I've known him for a while. We've hung out at conventions and stuff together. He's a good dude. So yeah, I ordered Demon Ship, like I said, a couple of weeks before Gen Con, I think, and it showed up while I was gone. So I want to work on that at some point in the future as well. But yeah, it's and he's working on a new game now, which is about pit fighters or something like that, I think. But the first one was it's been selling pretty well. He's been doing good with it, so that's very cool. After using a cheap compressor that came with an airbrush for $50 for the last year, I decided to spend $100 on a Miden compressor, and it's been great so far. I've not heard of that brand, but that's good. That's the thing. Like, I think a lot of people are like, okay, well, I want to get into airbrushing, but like the top of the line stuff is very expensive, and you're like, yeah, generally that's the case. That is generally the case. That top of the line stuff is expensive. The trick is that, especially when you start, you don't need the top of the line stuff. You know, you very usually want to start out with, and it depends. Some people want to go as cheap as possible, and that's fine. Understand that if you do enjoy what you're doing and you want to do more of it, eventually you're going to have to buy something better than that. And maybe eventually is a lot sooner than you might think. If you go really super cheap, right? Like if you go super cheap and you get an airbrush and one of those weird little wireless compressor thingies, and you start using it and you're like, this is great. That's not going to work great for you for very long. It's going to, might start on fire. Who's to say? But it also just isn't going to have the pressure that you might need or the variability of pressure that you might need. There's all kinds of little things. The airbrush probably won't last very long. Like I said, the one that I bought, the airbrush didn't work right from the get, but luckily I was able to screw in one of my regular good airbrushes. So some people believe then, well, then you shouldn't go with the cheapest option. You should go maybe with a little bit higher option when you're starting out, so you don't have to replace so quickly, and that's fine too. There are some people out there that are like, well, if I'm going to get into airbrushing, I have to buy the very best right off the bat. But then what happens if it turns out you hate it? What happens if you turn out you don't like painting miniatures anymore? Well, maybe you can sell it, hopefully. Otherwise, you're sitting there with a really expensive piece of kit that you might not want. So I always tell people to dial back on that. Same with like photography or anything. Like if you're just like, oh, I want to get into photography, but it looks like this Canon, A1 or A9 is like $6,000. And you're like, yeah, don't, or not Canon, sorry, Sony. Don't buy that. Like, don't start there. Start much lower. And then, you can do a lot with an inexpensive camera. And then eventually, sure, there are benefits to upgrading, but when you first start out, you don't need, I mean, honestly, again, if you're like, oh, I'm into photography, I'm going to tell you about a couple of apps you can put on your phone, which give you more control over the camera in there, and you would start there. I would tell you to start there, honestly. Anyway. Let's see here. Just make it without a battery at all, no exploding issue. That would also be, I think, smart. you're not wrong. Yeah. Hello from Germany. Hope you had a great time at Gen Con. Played my first 2,000 point 40k game today. Guard are so much fun. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to my 1,000 point guard. It's going to take me a while to get there. I did finish up the second squad of Cadian Shock Troops on Twitch just recently on Friday. I finished them up. So that's for the combat patrol. So those two are done. Now I need to do the command squad, which is 5 models. And then I need to do the armored walker guy, the sentinel. And then what else do I need to do? Oh, there's 2 like howitzer. Well, there's like a howitzer and like a missile pod thing. So the field ordnance units. And then that'll be done. But then I'm going to continue going along so that I can eventually extend that out to 1,000 points. I've got a Chimera that's all built and primed and base coated. I've got a Hellhound, same. I have a Manticore. That's the 4 missile one, I think, right? That's built but not primed or painted. And I've got other stuff I'm going to be adding in. Another squad of the Cadians, a squad of Casterkin, a squad of Krieg, some other stuff. So yeah, I'm going to do a 1,000 point. I'm not interested personally in playing 2,000 points. It seems like it's 2,000 points is too many models. Anyway, but yeah, so I'm looking to do that, but I'm looking forward to doing that soon. I'm getting an Iwater Eclipse next. I have a Pache, or is it Pache? Dual action siphon feed. Good brush, but cleaning those siphon feeds can be a pain. Yeah, for sure. Also, you usually have to go with a little bit higher PSI to make the siphon work. I'm generally shooting at about 20 PSI, and 20 PSI is sometimes not enough power to kind of suck the paint out of the siphon thing. So the gravity feed where it's on top, it works better for that kind of thing. Was looking to get Demonship, but it was out of stock last time I went to purchase it. Yeah, like I said, I think I pulled the trigger like probably 3 weeks ago now. I haven't looked recently to see how it's going. How's everyone doing? I'm kit bashing some minis for the Doomed. Nice. Yeah, I think that's like we were talked a little bit about the Doomed earlier. So that looks like it is. Like I said, I picked up the book. I didn't buy it. I picked it up and looked through it at Gen Con, and I was like, man, this seems like a lot. Like there's just, it's for me personally. I'm just, but I should probably, I don't know, maybe pick up the PDF or something like that. Malev is good people. You're right. I agree. Dave says, I have a copy of Demonship. I also plan on working on that soon. Nice. And you can get a mini of Malev and one of Whittle Goblin. Also true. Has anyone told you that you should read audiobooks? Soothing, calm voice. I have heard that. The issue is, I think it would have to be nonfiction audiobooks. When I listen to fiction audiobooks, those people do a lot of like voice acting, really, because they're, doing different voices for different characters, and there's all kinds of stuff like that. And I don't think I could do that very well. But like a nonfiction book, basically just as a narrator, talking about maybe history or, I don't know, whatever. Something like that I could potentially do. But I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Been airbrushing for a fair bit the past week. Keep running into major tip dry issues. Flow improver and retarder is the fix, or something else? I almost never have that. For one thing, I think it has something to do a little bit with the paint. Like I haven't had that problem with any of the Army Painter airbrush paints that I use. I've never had a clog or a dry tip. Generally, if it's a dry tip issue, almost always it's a white paint and usually a white primer. Doesn't matter who I use, Vallejo, Monument, whatever. White primer through your airbrush, if you're doing a bunch of it, has a tendency to clog on the tip, and you get that dry tip. It's not usually an internal clog. It's usually like right there in the tip, and you kind of have to. What I generally do is you turn that little nut at the back, and you pull the needle back a little bit, and then maybe you have just like a piece of wetted paper towel. You just sort of get in the tip there and just kind of twist it a couple of times to kind of clean things up. Put that needle, slide that needle forward again, tighten it down, spray on something that's not a model, to test, and then go from there. So it doesn't take forever to clean. Having like a wet paper towel around for that kind of very purpose makes a lot of sense. But again, I don't see it with personally, I don't see it with much except for generally a white primer. Pre-ordered Demonship from Black Site, but never received the STLs and the PDF, and then Black State Studios isn't very good at consumer feedback. Well, that's a bummer. So you're supposed to get STLs? Huh. Yeah, I guess maybe hit him up on Twitter if you do the Twitter. See if that helps. I'm not sure. If you sent him an email, I don't know. That's weird. Let's see here. Been enjoying my cheap Amazon kit. The brush didn't work until I took it apart and cleaned it well. Now no issues. Oh, that's pretty good. I got the Iwata TRN2 airbrush because I prefer the trigger mechanism. I have tried trigger airbrushes before, and I've always been like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's for me, but that's cool, though. I mean, I will be honest. If I'm airbrushing a lot of things, eventually, and this sounds stupid, this finger will get tired, like over a certain amount of time. If I'm doing a big bunch of things, and you're doing primer, and then a layer, and then another layer, or something like that, eventually you'd be just like, ugh, my finger. So I can see the trigger thing. That kind of makes sense. But I have never, I've messed with, who's the company that makes, it's known for their, Grex. I messed with a Grex one time at a convention. Just like they had like a big piece of paper and you could use it and spray and like write your name and stuff like that. And it was not bad, but yeah, I'm not sure. I want to say that Monument has a Grex that they, or I don't know if it's a Grex, but they have a trigger one that they sell too. It might be just a Grex as well. I'm not sure. Does anyone wargame with homebrew shrinky dinks? I think some people do. Who's the company? Hero Forge. Hero Forge is a company that you can, through a browser, design your own 3D model, right? And then they will either print it for you and mail it to you, or you can download the STL for a price and then print it yourself. But they have all these crazy custom things and all this crazy stuff, and it's their whole thing. So it's pretty cool. But a new feature, which I just found out this year at Gen Con when I stopped at their booth, is that you can also design a model and then like rotate the way you want, and then they will print out like a clear, it looks kind of like a shrinky dink, if you know what I'm talking about. It's like a clear plastic, full color, like of your guy, like in this position, holding a gun and a stopwatch. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, and then they will print it out and then do that. And then they print the back out on the backside. And then it's like cut around. And so if you're looking for a 2-dimensional model for some reason, that you, in full color, you can do that. Now, they will also print full color 3-dimensional models, which Vince and I looked at their booth, and we were both frankly stunned. They are amazingly good. Vince kept asking, he's like, so this is just straight out of the machine? And they're like, yeah, that's what I came in like out of the machine. He's like, you didn't go back in and dry brush on top of this? And they're like, nope. And it looks, they're really surprisingly good. But if you're looking for 2-dimensional, check out Hero Forge. Just first of all, check out Hero Forge anyway. They're just so fun to sit there and just design your own minis and position the arms and the heads and around and put, oh, I want to give him a skeleton head, and I want to give him robot arms, and I want to give him a baseball bat. And I mean, just, yeah, they've really like gone kind of crazy with all of that. The website's gotten really amazing. And also it's completely web-based, so you don't have to download like an app or anything like that. And it even works on your phone, which is crazy too. So, I mean, unless it's like a landline, then it doesn't work on your phone. But a cell phone, generally a smartphone, it'll work just fine. Let's see here. If you're only base coating, varnishing, doing the odd zenithal highlight, you don't need a fancy airbrush. I agree. And you certainly don't need an expensive compressor. I also agree with that too. Yeah. I honestly, like, so many people are like, but airbrushing sounds really scary. And I'm like, literally just priming with your airbrush will save you so much time, paint, like you buy a bottle of airbrush primer and then compare that to how many different rattle cans you might have to buy over the, just like, yeah, seriously. Like, even if you just prime, you're saving money and you're saving time. If you prime and also zenithal, even better. If you maybe prime and then maybe do some colored zenithal, like that kind of stuff. Like if you're painting Space Marines that are blue, for example, you don't need to do a black and white zenithal and then go over there and paint them blue. You could just do a blue and black zenithal, and then you're already, ahead of the game. It's you don't need to be fancy to use an airbrush, and you don't have to do fancy things with your airbrush. It will save you time. Like, even if you live in a part of the country where you can prime outside with a rattle can 12 months out of the year, maybe more, great. But most of us don't. And even sometimes it does rain, or it's just too humid or too windy or whatever. So if you have the space in your home to be able to do it, and you don't need a ton, frankly, airbrushing is great. It really does help. It makes your miniatures look better, I think. As cameras go, I got a Canon 60D DSLR camera for $2,200. Odd story, I got it so that I could get a car since I don't have a credit rating at the time. So you bought that so that you would have and then you could, yeah, it makes sense. I've seen that before. Yeah, like honestly, like I've spent a lot of money on cameras over the years, a lot of money on cameras, but you don't need to. And sometimes it's also like not a good idea. You know, like this year at Gen Con, I did some street photography. You know, I also did videography and things like that while I was at the convention. The stuff that you saw, that maybe like the shorts that I did and things like that, those were all taken with, I don't want to say an inexpensive camera, because it's not. I don't have it within arm's reach, as it turns out. But it's a Sony ZV-1, which last time I looked was probably around $800. But it is a tiny little point and shoot, built-in lens, which has got a bit of a zoom, and good image stabilization. Shoots video very nicely. Shoots 4K. The other benefit to it, especially which I didn't even know until I just discovered it this year at Gen Con, if I take the camera and turn it sideways to shoot stuff for like YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels and things like that, it has a sensor in it. Unlike most cameras, your cell phone knows when you turn your camera sideways, so that when you open it up in a computer, the video goes this way and it's not this way but turns, so that you have to turn it back. But most regular cameras don't do that, but the ZV-1 does. So when I would shoot vertically and I open it up in the Mac, it shows up vertically, so I don't have to rotate it, which is just a nice extra step, honestly, especially if you're taking 20 or 30 or 50 little clips over the course of a day. Having to go through and rotate them all is a pain in the rear. So that's a nice thing too, but that's not a particularly expensive camera. The other benefit is if I had brought this thing as an example, this is and this isn't the biggest camera that I own, but this is a pretty good sized camera. This is a Fuji X-T5, which I love this camera, but it's not really for video. It's more for stills. It can shoot video, but it's really best, I think, shooting stills. This is a lot to carry around in comparison to a little tiny camera that's smaller than a pack of cigarettes. So I carried two small cameras. They're about the pack of size of cigarettes. I had my ZV-1 for video, which is a Sony camera, and then I had a little Canon point and shoot called a Canon. It's either G7X or GX7. I can't remember which. The Mark II. There is a Mark III out, but the Mark II I like a little bit better, so I bought that one. And I use that for stills. And if you follow me on Twitter or on Threads, I posted some black and white pictures that I took, some street photography while I was there. But it's great for that. And then the other camera worked great for the other stuff, like I said, like the video stuff. So in certain situations, you don't want to lug around a bunch of equipment. So that was very helpful. So sometimes having smaller stuff, and it's also less expensive, makes a good sense, depending on what you're using it for. And again, an inexpensive airbrush, if you're basically just be priming and zenithaling, going crazy and spending too much on it, you don't need to go down that road. The $150 Masters compressor with a tank is a grand slam. Their $40 airbrush is actually more than decent also. Yeah, the Masters stuff, Vince just did a video earlier part of this year where he talked about different airbrushes and stuff like that. And Masters are nice airbrushes, especially for the price. I wanted to play Demon Ship so bad that while my terrain was printing, I drew and cut everything out and played it on a flat notebook paper. Just used minis I already had. Nice. Also need to upgrade camera. The Masters G222 set with tank compressor has been serving me well, but I just use it for base coats. Sure. And again, I mainly use my airbrush compressor, or my airbrush setup, for priming, zenithal base coats, non-zenithal base coats sometimes, varnishing, a little bit of highlighting, but I'm not like in there like painting eyes and stuff like that with my airbrush. I never have. I'm always, well, first of all, I don't paint eyes because it's silly, but I paint, if I want to get into details and things like that, I'm generally going to use a regular just brush, but I do the airbrushing stuff first usually and then go from there. Every once in a while I then come back and I'll do some shading with airbrush using some speed paints shots with the airbrush to kind of give a nice filter, but not cover the colors that I've put on, but to just sort of like darken them in some spots and like shadows and things like that. And then varnish after that usually. But yeah, you don't need to Like, I think a lot of people think that once you get into an airbrush, you have to like paint the entire model with the airbrush. And that's, oh gosh, no. Yeah, no, you just kind of do the basic stuff that takes longer, and then you can make it be quicker and also smoother and easier. And then, you know, go back in with your brush. Anytime I think about buying an airbrush, I watch half a YouTube video on it, think this looks complicated and expensive, and continue using brushes. I mean, that's a choice, but like I said, it's not as complicated and as expensive as you might think. And specifically, if you live in an area where sometimes you just can't prime outside, it's a lifesaver. Because again, before I had an airbrush, living here in Wisconsin, I definitely remember several like last nice days of October where I'm running outside with a bunch of stuff so I can rattle can it all, so I have something to paint over the winter. Because if you're like, oh, this is cool, I want to paint this thing, and it's the middle of January and you build it and you're like, well, I have to wait till spring till I can prime it, like that's not fun. So yeah. The Doomed sounds like a DC War Comics title from the 70s, like The Born Losers. Well, could be. You should host a YouTube show and read questions and reply to them with that voice. Well, I mean, isn't that what I'm doing right now? I don't know. Maybe. I had a blast at Gen Con playing the Summer of Plunder narrative events for War Machine. 3D terrain is awesome. 3D terrain is awesome. I agree. I know that the War Machine competitive crowd kind of was like, yeah, 3D terrain, we don't really need that for a while. I don't know what they're like these days, but I'm glad to hear that you're using the terms War Machine and 3D terrain in the same sentence in a positive way. That's good, because yeah, I like 3D terrain a lot. I pulled the trigger on an Iwata Eclipse last year, used a cheap one before, worked fine, but the dry tip and clog issues were so much better with the better airbrush. Well, yeah, I can see that being the case too. Every time I game at my FLGS, I pick up a blind pack of Space Marine Heroes 2022. They've been great for kit bashing upscaled Firstborn Marines. Nice. This may have been asked, but of you and Vince's games, do you have a favorite? I don't know. That's a good question. Like, Rain in Hell was my idea. Space Station Zero was Vince's idea. And Majestic 13 was my idea. So we kind of, like, initial ideas. The initial, like, you know, hey, this is a thing we should build a game around. But I don't know that there's necessarily a favoritism there. Like, I like Space Station Zero quite a bit, even though it's not, like, it was technically, it came out of Vince's head more, you know, than the other two games did, because they kind of, those ideas came out of my head. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think I have a favorite necessarily, no. I think dry tip is caused by releasing the air before the paint at the end of the spray. For a brief period of time, only paint goes through without air and dries on the needle. I think also, again, one of the reasons that it happens for me once in a while, mostly with white primer, is just because white is a difficult color for airbrushing. The particles, the pigments have to be generally a bit bigger, from what I understand, and so therefore you're more likely to get a bit of a clog with white as opposed to, say, other colors, specifically black as well. If you can't design a robot squirrel, and you hardly have enough options. That's my take on Hero Forge. I mean, you're not wrong. Vince was kind of trying to make a robot squirrel. We were standing there at the booth, and he was messing around with it. They had it on an iPad or some sort of big tab. I think it was an iPad tablet, and he was messing around with it. And he had a squirrel, but not a robot squirrel. So someday soon. Game is hard, but that challenge is what hooked me. Definitely not for folks who are into winning big all the time. Proper grimdark uphill battle, focus on the narrative. For Doomed, gotcha. Any new Black Templar stuff? Like, have they released anything new? Not that I know of. I suspect when the Black Templar Codex comes out, or whenever that is, I'm sure they'll come out with some new stuff there too. There's some thought out in the wider community that it's better to prime with a rattle can than an airbrush, particularly GW Chaos Black, and then use your airbrush for layers after. Thoughts? I still prefer to use Rattlecan when I am priming plastic terrain kits. I don't want to prime my models with Rattlecan, basically. One of the reasons that I could see people saying that it's better to do it with a Rattlecan on your miniatures is because Rattlecan primer does have a tendency to stick to plastic better than Airbrush primer does. Like, it's not like Airbrush primer just flakes and falls off when you're looking at it. You still, like, if you rub stuff against it, it can come off for sure. Airbrush or Rattlecan primer can come off too. You might just have to push on it a lot harder, but it can. You can scrape it off. But if you are concerned about the robustness of your primer, like, man, I really hope that all the times that I'm grabbing the model very stiffly and just rubbing my fingers on it, I hope it doesn't rub off. You should probably use Rattlecan, honestly. Now, the thing is that when you're messing with terrain, that's exactly why you want to use Rattlecan for plastic terrain. Because when you spray over it, it sticks to the plastic a lot better. You beat up your terrain more than you beat up your models. You're a little bit more gingerly placing your models on the board, but terrain, you're like, okay, I'm going to put this on the shelf and get it over here and move it over there and that kind of stuff. So for terrain, I prefer to use Rattlecan. Still don't use GW Chaos Black. I'm not paying $30 a can for Rattlecan. That's stupid, in my opinion. What I generally use these days is camouflage paint from Rust-Oleum or Krylon. And I prefer Krylon because the nozzle is better. But yeah, they have a line of 6 different colors in the camouflage line. There's black, there's a very dark brown, there's 2 different shades of like sand and 2 different shades of like olive drab, a light and a dark on both of those. And those are great primers, especially for terrain specifically. But if I'm painting a miniature, I generally still want to just prime it with my airbrush just because it's easier to get in where all the nooks and crannies where I need to. It's faster. Yeah, and I just don't try to beat up my models as much. Bought my first airbrush for only base coating green Space Marines, World Changer, all the other fancy applications, just a bonus. Sure, yeah, absolutely. I love Hero Forge. I designed and bought a color printed miniature from them for my Rain and Hell leader. He is pricey, but looks amazing. Yeah, that's the thing, is that they're not cheap. Like, at the end of the day, if you get it printed in full color and shipped to you in the whole deal, a single model is probably going to rival GW in cost. You'll probably be looking at like, I don't know, $50 maybe. But if you just want it in like regular plastic and you're going to paint it yourself, that's considerably cheaper. Or if you've got a friend with a printer or you have a 3D printer, you can also just buy the STL and then print that yourself. So that's even considerably cheaper yet. And then it can be completely custom designed. It's great for RPG folks who are like, this is my character. But for us, even if you're doing a skirmish games, or I need like 5 guys for Majestic 13, designing them all in Hero Forge is expensive. Like, because they'll be, like I said, especially if you're getting them color printed. Yeah, they'd be $50 per person times 5, which is expensive. It's pretty expensive. But again, if you were going to print them yourself, it gets considerably cheaper. So yeah, take a look at that. Let's see here. What's a good beginner airbrush to look at? I would tell you to go look on Amazon and look for Masters Airbrush. They make good kits that are a decent airbrush and a decent compressor for a decent price. I once took voice acting classes and they described my voice as best for instructions. I think that I would also be good for instructions and stuff like that. Again, I don't think when I listen to audiobooks that are fiction, they're doing all kinds of voices. And then this lady says this, and I just don't think I could do that. You know what I mean? At least not nearly as well as like Toby, what's his name? For the GW stuff. Toby Longbottom. That's not right. Toby Longworth. Probably right. Like, he does great work. I love his work on Eisenhorn and Ravenor and those book series and things like that. But yeah, I don't think I could do that. I was looking for some photography classes held by a local club, but they specified that my compact need not apply. The problem is very frequently it's compact little cameras sometimes don't give you the ability to do manual settings. That being said, I think that that's short-sighted of them because many compact cameras these days do give you the ability to do shorts, manual settings. And I think to just be like, look, until you buy a fancy camera, you can't come take classes with us. That's kind of a dick move, in my opinion. I have the same Fuji. I did my second YouTube video with it. Nice. The X-T5, cool. What's the lens? I have 2 lenses. I have... Well, no, I take that back. I have 3 lenses. This is a Sigma 30mm 1.4. And then I have, this is a fancy Fuji Pro lens. Nope, I take that back. This is the Viltrox, which is also, it says Pro on it. This is why I got confused. This is awesome. This is a 75mm 1.2. Like, that is a heck of a piece of glass. That is just a gorgeous, gorgeous, huge, giant piece of glass, which I like quite a bit. This is an awesome lens. And paired with the Fuji, especially with the ability of the Fuji to focus track, like there's a setting in there where you can set it on animal. So like I was taking amazing pictures of the cats. Like anytime they would look at me, it would just like focus in just on where their eye was. And you take the shot and it would be just razor sharp. But I would be shooting at 1.2. So like they would start to go to focus by the time it hit their ears. You know what I mean? Like, and then you just get that really kind of cool thing. And then the other one, this is the Fuji XF lens. This is a 16 to 55 f2.8 straight. Those are the 3 lenses that I have for the X-T5. I like it quite a bit. But again, like it can shoot video. I have other cameras that I use generally for shooting video. So this was the reason I picked this up was just for stills. But like almost every camera these days, they can do both. Let's see here. Can nearby vehicles be used by characters? No, there's no vehicle combat or driving or anything like that. You can use it for cover, but yeah, you can't. There's no vehicle rules in Majestic 13. We haven't really, especially with skirmish games, I think that vehicle rules sometimes can be squirrely. I don't know. Maybe someday we'll make a game that's all about vehicle rules. That'd be kind of cool. Fuji makes a good camera. Another decently priced DSLR camera is the Canon Rebel series. I think Vince uses a Rebel for his videos. A T something or other. T6i? Maybe T7i? Something like that. Let's see here. I started with a $35 cheap as chips airbrush, realized I liked using it and used it 3 or 4 times, then upgraded to a really good Sparmax. Still have my hardware store compressor though. Sure, yeah. I almost never use my airbrush on miniatures, but I use it frequently for plastic models. For miniatures, I tend to use a brush for everything, but I clear coat as I'm in no hurry. Gotcha. An itch on my knee, sorry. Let's see here. Trying to time exactly when to prime miniatures outside is in Wisconsin is the worst. Yeah, you're not wrong. Yeah, that's definitely a situation. I remember I left, there was a horror film festival going on downtown that I left during, like, I was like looking at the, like, here's all the different movies that are going to be happening. I don't think I want to see these 2, so I'm going to leave and then come back because I definitely want to see this one at the end. But I like drove home quick, rattle canned a bunch of stuff that I needed because it was like the only good, like it got like way warmer than anyone expected for like late October. And I sprayed a bunch of stuff and then went back, you know, to the film festival downtown and then was like, okay, cool. And I made it. But yeah. Select your favorite child. Greetings from Sleepy, Ontario. I mean, sure, kind of. I get that, Molly. Let's see here. Airbrush cleans up faster than my brushes, but I might be doing overboard cleaning my brushes. Sure. I mean, that, you know, I think it's a good idea to spend some time cleaning your brushes because then they last longer. What are you most looking forward to before year's end? Hobby-wise, gaming-wise, or other? I don't know. Like, Vince and I are working on the periodical, the little zine that we're going to put out for the first time this winter. And that's the plan, is to put it out once per year. We're going to put out a zine with a micro game in it and also some add-ons for some of our previous games, little modular little add-ons that you can throw on there. So that'll be PDF only. There won't be a print version, sadly, but still, you can print it if you want to. I'm gonna format it in a way so that it prints like, you can print it on an 8.5 by 11 and fold it, and then do the staple thing and all that kind of stuff, and then you may have a little booklet. If you've seen like when I show you folks Space Weirdos. That's also formatted in that same kind of zine style. So that's how this new thing's going to be done. So we're working on that at the same time while we're also working on the next game for spring of 2024. So I'm looking forward to getting that game out and having you folks check that out, the periodical. And then what else? I don't know. Yeah, like there's not anything that I've seen right now that I'm super excited about. Honestly, the thing I'm looking forward to the most, I suppose that's not really to do with miniature gaming so much, but in September, there's Starfield is coming out from Bethesda. It's a video game. It's the first new video game property that they've made in 25 years, because all they've been making has been Skyrim stuff and, you know, Elder Scrolls and then Fallout stuff for years and years and years and years. And this is the first new thing that they're kind of going into. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to Starfield and checking that out, which will be coming out less than a month. So yeah, that's but as far as actual like games that are coming out or anything like that, I can't think of anything off the top of my head really. I don't know what else is coming out this year, to be honest with you. Like, I don't think that GW is coming out with anything big. They're coming out with obviously some new codices and stuff like that, but I don't think they're coming out with any new game. Well, I mean, there's the little tiny, the epic Horus Heresy stuff, which I'm not super into, not really interested in. But I think that's supposed to be coming out before the end of the year. Let's see here. Oil paints are similar to airbrush in terms of going through a barrier. Once you get through the barrier, just do oil washes with no stains since you can clean it. It opens up a whole new skill set. Sure, yeah. I noticed white ink was clogging the airbrush more often. That's odd because I didn't usually have a problem. When I used to use white ink for my Zenithals, I wouldn't usually have a problem with it clogging. If anything, it would clog less than the Vallejo white primer. Which was a benefit, which is one of the reasons I liked using it too. That's weird. What I use now, generally, if I'm going to do a black and white Zenithal, is I will use a black primer, generally Monuments black primer, because that's what's out there that I like. So I'll use that. And then I will usually do the white, actually just using the regular matte white airbrush paint from the Army Painter. So I just generally use that instead of using another primer. Like I don't need to have a white primer. Like other paints will stick just fine to the white paint. But if it was just white paint over the plastic, then the white paint might not stick as well to the plastic. But doing the primer first, yeah, you see what I'm saying. Works out just fine. So, let's see here. Recently priming my Starship models with Chaos Black and absolutely love it. So much more grip than airbrush primer. I would tell you to honestly also take a look at other, if you're like really into Rattlecan, go to your auto parts store and find yourself a sandable automotive primer. That's, I think, a big deal. Sandable automotive primers have a very matte finish generally. They stick really well to stuff like that. And instead of paying $25 to $30 a can, you will pay $8 generally. Duplicolor is the brand that I like to get locally at like AutoZone or whatever for that kind of stuff. But again, like I said, I've also been focusing a lot on the Krylon camouflage paints. Like the black camouflage paint from them is a great primer that I use all the time. I just think that GW's just charging way too much for their canned sprays. It's just way, way, way too much. Like that gold Retributor armor stuff, it's like $35 a can or something like that. 32, 35. It's just crazy. I suddenly feel compelled to paint something olive drab. I mean, you know, could do some guard. Let's see here. Ace Hardware brand gray primer is my go-to and my similar for Adeptus Battle Gray. Nice. Noob Painter, how you doing? Badger Patriot 105 is a good first brush for priming and base coats. Yeah, I could see that. Watch some YouTube people putting spray cans in a cup and then using that in the airbrush. Seems interesting. I've seen people do that too. It seems like a lot of work. I mean, if you have to match a specific color very, very specifically, then I guess. But yeah, I don't know. That does seem like a lot of work. What size robot scroll are we talking? I don't know. It's a good question. Really neat watching airbrush artists explain things who are not mini painters. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Good morning from West Hempstead, New York. You're my favorite stream to paint every Sunday. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks again for the show. Working on my xenomorph-themed Tyranids. Nice. Let's see. What would you attribute, not attribute? What would you attribute the recent rise in more mini-agnostic DIY skirmish-type games to? Planet 28, Forbidden Psalm, 5 Leagues, etc. I think it's partially... just because people want to be able to create their own games and use the models that they want. So it is easier than ever before to be able to produce that kind of information and get it out there to the public. Like, I started a small little game company with my friend Peter back in 1992, and we produced a game that was kind of like a miniatures game, but not exactly. It was a bit of a hybrid miniatures game, board game. It was called BattleBots. This is long before the television show with the remote control cars banging into each other. Anyway, that's another story. Long story short, we made this game that fit inside of a CD case. If you remember what CDs are, compact discs, they used to come in these plastic case called jewel cases, and we would buy the jewel cases from a local record store that would get them to us in bulk. And inside the jewel case, there was this black insert that the CD would fit into. We would take that part out and recycle it. We just wanted the clear part. And then we printed everything, had everything printed so that it would fit inside there. And we even included dice inside the jewel case. They were 5mm tiny little, a pair of tiny little six-siders. So we put those in there, and then we would take them to a place here in town to get them shrink wrapped. And then we would sell those. But we couldn't sell PDFs because there were no PDFs. It was 1992. Like, that was the thing. So it was a lot of work to get this stuff out there. And then we had to, like, we would sell it at Gen Con, back when Gen Con was still in Milwaukee. You could get what was known as an entrepreneurial booth, which meant that you could only sell one product because you were a new entrepreneur, and they would give you the booth for half price, which back then the booth cost $300. So you got the booth for $150. Nowadays, if you want an entrepreneurial booth, they put you in this weird back end of the place, and I think it's $2,000 for the same booth. I'm like, ugh. Anyway, nonetheless, nowadays you can just sell stuff as a PDF, which is very easy. You can get global distribution that way with it. You know, go through a company like Wargame Vault, or you can go with itch.io, or there's all kinds of different places you can do that. Gumroad, maybe. I don't know if I trust Gumroad these days. But yeah, you have all these different options. And obviously, like, layout at home is a lot easier than it used to be back in the day. And all these different kind of things at your disposal, which is awesome. So I think that's part of it. But I think also it's just people kind of got tired of big army games, and people also got tired of, like, this is the game and these are the models and that's what you're supposed to be using. People want to kit bash stuff. They want to use stuff from other companies. They want to use stuff they already have, that kind of stuff. I think that's been the big draw. And then also, frankly, you see one company do it and you're like, well, heck, I can do that. You know what I mean? So there's also that benefit as well. I have a Canon Rebel XTI. It's a bit old, but enough for pics of minis. Sure, absolutely. Have you rented any extra fancy lenses before? I work at a place and have been tempted to rent an ultra macro or something to see how badly painted my eyes are on my minis. Ooh, don't take macro pictures of your minis. No, they will. It's amazing how, like, close, when you get a real close macro shot, you're like, wow, that's terrible. I shouldn't have done that. But yeah. No, though, I have not rented any lenses. I've kicked around the idea here and there. I've had friends that have rented lenses, but I've never rented lenses. Generally, the people that I know that rent lenses are like, I'm going to an event and I need to rent a 600mm, giant monster lens, and I don't want to buy one because they cost, $11,000 or something ridiculous like that. I'm generally not looking for, like, I have one lens that goes to 200mm. One. Most of my lenses are considerably less than that, so I'm not just generally into I'm not shooting pictures of birds and stuff like that too much or anything like that. So I'm thinking about flying to the US just for Gen Con or Adepticon. Any tips? Which one would be more worth it? Which to look out for? I play mostly army war games. If you play mostly war games, miniature games, whatever, then I would probably not say Gen Con. Gen Con is a great convention. I enjoy it, but it is mostly RPGs and board games. And then somewhere way down in third, possibly fourth place is then miniature games. So it's not a big miniature gaming convention. It is a big tabletop gaming convention, but it's mostly RPGs and board games all over the place, and then a little bit of that. If you want a miniatures convention that's also considerably fewer people and probably cheaper in many different ways, I would tell you Adepticon or Nova are probably about the best two for that. LVO is also decent. It's just LVO is very tournament oriented, whereas Nova is less so. And Adepticon, sure, there are tournaments, but a lot of Adepticon is all the other stuff, specifically a lot of classes and things like that too. So, and a good sized dealer area as well. But like the entire dealer area for Adepticon would probably fit into the Gen Con dealer area 10 times, 15 times. Like really, like the Gen Con dealer area, I get people all the time in the videos comments who are like, you should make a video where you walk up and down and show all the booths. Like if there was nobody standing in the way, it would still take me 3 hours easy just to show you, even like talk for 30 seconds about each booth and then walk to the next one. And they're across from each other, maybe not 3 hours, 2 hours, a long time. But if there's people there, which there always are, it is astounding how like it's just giant backpacks in your face, and there's people just stop in the middle of the road to like look at stuff. And I'm like, if you want to look at stuff over there, walk over that direction. Get out of the middle of the way. We're trying to get places. Anyway. Let's see here. And the thing about like DC is, well, I mean, Nova's in DC, so flying into DC is not hard. Adepticon is near Chicago, pretty near Chicago. So again, flying into O'Hare is not hard. Flying into Indiana is a little bit harder. Like generally a bit more expensive or whatever. It's fewer flights go into there in comparison to those other two. I'm afraid to use the varnish through an airbrush, but even more afraid of the rattle cans. Does it clean well from an airbrush? Oh yeah, it cleans fine from an airbrush because it's generally all water-based. I mean, it depends on what you use. If you use some sort of like weird solvent-based kind of stuff, like Testers makes Testers makes a something called Dull Coat, which comes in a tiny little expensive spray can, but you can also buy it in a bottle and then just strew it to your airbrush. I've never tried it. It makes me a little nervous. But otherwise, like regular acrylic spray varnish or acrylic varnishes designed for airbrush, they clean out just fine. You know, as long as you do it like you've sprayed, I'm done now clean out airbrush. If it's like I've sprayed and now I'm going to go have lunch and then come back and try to clean it tomorrow, that's not a good idea. But that's not good with paint either. It's not good with anything. So yeah, you always want to clean your airbrush as soon as you're done using it. Even if it's just like run a bunch of water through it and then put it in water. If it dries inside the airbrush, that is a problem. That's where you get clogs. Certainly looking forward to Starfield release less than a month ago. Indeed. At Gen Con, what was your favorite game to either watch or take part in? I didn't get to take part in any games, actually, which is generally not what I'm there for. I had plenty of friends that I was there with. There were, including me, 10 of us in the hotel room. Admittedly, it was a big hotel room. It was a penthouse we were up on, but still, I was sleeping on an air mattress on the floor over by the dining room. But those guys, a lot of those folks, like, there are a couple of the guys in that group come there just to play demos. Like that's what just to see what kind of games, what kind of board games they want to buy in the future. Some people come there just to play like RPG stuff and whatever. So, but for me, I'm usually there for other reasons and such, businessy things and whatever. But yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I watched I watched other people play demos here and there on some stuff. And I think the thing that I was most interested in was probably the Cyberpunk Red combat zone from Monster Fight Club. Blue 9, how you doing? Have you seen the YouTube poop someone made of you? I don't know what that means. I don't know what a YouTube poop is. Doesn't sound good, does it? I don't know. But no, I haven't. Let's see here. Baldur's Gate 3 has ruined my anticipation for it. Only human characters in Starfield. Oh, I see what you're saying. Because you can only be a human in Starfield. I think it makes sense within the story because it doesn't seem like there are aliens in the game at all. So if there were aliens, then I would go, well, it might be nice if you could play an alien. But if there are no aliens and it's just basically a little bit more hard sci-fi, like there are these potential maybe alien artifacts, but we don't know, like the aliens aren't hanging around like going, hey, how's it going? That doesn't bother me too much. I'm interested in board game 2. That's not Baldur's Gate 3. Sorry, I'm interested in Baldur's Gate 3, but this is not coming out onto the PlayStation 5 until like September. So by that point, I'll probably be playing Starfield on the Xbox, and so I'll probably play Baldur's Gate sometime later this year. I think Starfield is too mighty for my PC, but Baldur's Gate plays nicely, so it'll occupy me for a while. Yeah, I'm concerned about that too, which is why I'm going to use the Xbox instead, I think. Even though it'll be locked at 30 frames per second, and I know that's the end of the world to some folks, especially for a single-player game, that doesn't bother me. I don't know. Ink will go through an airbrush more smoothly than acrylic paint, but white of any medium requires more air pressure up the PSI in your compressor. Yeah. Really liking the upcoming Cities of Sigmar line. Never thought I would be interested in them, but the line looks so fun to paint. A lot of the models do look pretty cool. I'm not going to lie. Yeah, I've looked at a bunch of those models so far. They look pretty cool. I stick with the Krylon and Rust-Oleum flat primers. Oh yeah, you definitely want it to be flat. That's the thing that's nice about the camouflage line from both of those is they are like ultra flat because camouflage evidently isn't supposed to be shiny, which makes sense, I guess. What's your opinion on USB rechargeable compressors for airbrushing? By the way, longtime fan. Well, thank you, Chris. We were talking about those earlier, actually. I bought one to try it out. The airbrush that it came with didn't work, so I had to put my own airbrush on there, which was trivially easy. And then it worked okay. The downside is a couple of things. Number one, with those, they don't give you the ability to change pressure at all, PSI. So that's sort of an issue depending on how you like to paint. The other problem, and I mentioned this earlier, is that one of my Patreon folks on Discord mentioned that they were charging it and it exploded because it was either cheap batteries, cheap energy controller built into the battery, like however that goes. Lithium ion batteries can blow up. It just happens. That's why they don't let you put them in your luggage anymore on airplanes. You have to put them in your carry-on, so if they blow up in the in the normal cabin, and we can all figure out what to do about that. If they blow up in the under part of the airplane, they can start a fire, and then that's it's not great. Anyway, yeah, so that's one thing to keep an eye on is that you want to watch out and make sure that it doesn't don't put it on charge and then leave for the weekend. It's not going to be great. So, or even leave to go get lunch. You're going to want to keep an eye on it. Not want to show GW any love, but shipping spray cans can't be cheap. I mean, everybody else does it. So I don't think this is all shipping. You know what I mean? Army Painter, regular brands like Duplicolor and stuff like that, but you're not wrong. It's not cheap, but it's still also, I do think their sprays are way overpriced. Walked into FLGS yesterday and saw that game book you brought home from Gen Con. The Old Gods of Appalachia. That's a cool looking book. It's I'm very interested in reading through it. But I want to listen to the podcast, I think, first, actually. At a model garage kit seminar, I mentioned zenithal priming, and the presenter wasn't familiar. Would it work for larger models or only for wargaming? I think I did it on my vehicles for the Guard to some degree, I think that even if you do a pretty heavy zenithal where you're you've primed it dark and now you're spraying it whatever the lighter color might be. Like in my situation with my guard stuff, I'm priming black, and then I am spraying a color from Army Painter called Uniform Gray, which is a very cool gray. And I'm spraying that on the vehicles as well, kind of like, obviously on the guys, I'm doing it on a Zenithal thing, you know, so I get like the darker colors in the armpits and between the legs and, you know, that kind of stuff. But the rest of it's that other good color. And just having those little micro shadows, even on the side of a Chimera, where like if you're spraying it from above with that lighter color and you originally primed it in all the nooks and crannies with black or whatever darker color, you're still going to have spots where like a panel sticks out, you know, and then just a little bit of shadow like right here, even though it just, you know, it just pops the detail and makes things look better. I don't know that like scale modelers use that because they've got different things that they do. I don't know that scale modelers lean as heavily into the whole concept of I have to paint the shadows and the highlights. Gamers do that more frequently. So yeah, I'll be honest, I haven't done a scale model since I was a kid. I used to paint and, World War II airplanes and stuff like that. I had a de Havilland Mosquito. I had a B-25 Mitchell. I had a few others, but those are the two that I can really remember working on and having a great time with. But again, I was like 9 or 10, so they weren't painted well, you know, and it was all just slapped on with the cheap tester's brush and the little glass square bottles of enamels. But actual scale modelers, I don't know if they're big into Zenithal, but they might be. I'm not sure. They might call it something else, maybe. Did you see Peachy's interview with the former GW employee? Titles, GW contrast, save GW. It was very eye-opening in GW's business practice. I haven't. No, I should probably do that. Just come back to painting side of the hobby. I was reluctant as there are many good people that are much better than I am. Embarrassed by my painting. YouTube is good vids, but they're overwhelming. Any advice? You just only ever want to compare yourself to yourself. Don't compare yourself to painters out there on the internet, because very frequently those painters have been doing it for 20 years or longer. So if you've just gotten back into it and you compare yourself, who's been maybe painting again for a year, to someone who's been painting pretty much nonstop for 20 to 30 years, that's not a very good comparison. You're not giving yourself any favors by doing that. So really, and I've done videos about this, the most important thing is to compare your model that you just finished with the model you finished last time or the model you finished last year. If you're getting better and you're happier with your output than you were 6 months ago or a year ago, then you are progressing. And that's what you need to do. You don't want to compare yourself to others, just compare yourself to your previous self. That's how you improve. If you compare yourself to others, you'll be sad, because you'll be like, oh man, this guy's like, I mean, like, look at Sam. Like, oh man, Sam, like, he's such a good painter. I'll never be that good. Well, he started when he was 8. Like, I've seen, he's got a model at our local shop. I used it in one of my videos as the thumbnail. It's like this, it's like an old orc or a Gretchen or something like that. It's painted on real thick. He's like green skin, bright yellow, bright red, that kind of stuff. It's in, I forget which exactly video it was, but he was the thumbnail. That's a picture of one of Sam's miniatures from when he was 8 years old, when he first started. It actually sits at our local game store in a case, along with a bunch of other painted stuff. A lot of other painted stuff by Sam, stuff that's won awards, is in that case, but there's still that original, you know, little Gretchen or orc or whatever the heck it was. And yeah, so just compare yourself to yourself. You just want to get better on your next model. If this is what you want to do, get better on your next model than you did on your last model. Some people are like, I don't even care if I get better. I just got to get this stuff painted because I want to play with it. Now, there are people who are like, don't care about the quality at all. That's fine. But if you're caring about the quality, but you're also trying to temper it with like speed, I need to get more things in the tabletop, there are levels of that. But nonetheless, like, I am a better tabletop painter than I was 3 years ago, 4 years ago, for sure. But I'm not trying to generally win awards. Now, that being said, I am currently working on a display piece that I'm going to be taking to a competition in DC at the end of this month. I'm not looking forward to it. I've been working on it. It's fine, but I don't, you know, I'm just doing it to kind of get out of my comfort zone and try display painting. I am already finding I don't enjoy display painting, so I'm sure I won't be doing this again. But I will at least be able to say, hey, I entered a competition one time. So again, you don't need to, though, for sure. Wait, you made that BattleBots game? No. Well, I made a BattleBots game. If you go look on like Board Game Geek, and you type in BattleBots, there will be a game that has my name on it. Me and another guy, Peter Spejos. I'm sure there's probably also a BattleBots regular board game made by Hasbro or somebody like that. But yeah, there was an original BattleBots game that we made back in '92 was the first edition. And then eventually, like in 2001, the BattleBots people's lawyers reached out and were like, hey, you're using our name and you can't do that. And we came back and said, hey, here's proof that we've been using it since 1992, which is 5 years before you guys did, which in trademark law is what's known as automatic first use. So what do you want to do about that? So then they bought all the rest of the games that we had in stock, which was literally only 70 games. So they just basically cut us a check for at face value, like, you know, they were $11 games. So they basically, I don't know, paid us like $800. We shipped them the games. Whoops, I clunked the mic again. Sorry. We shipped them the games, and then we just republished the game because we said, look, we get to keep the copyright. We just won't use the name. And they're like, all right. So we republished the game and called it Metal Crushers, but it was the same game. But then it was just PDF only by that point because PDFs were getting a thing. So it used to be on Wargame Vault and what do they call it over at, what the heck did they used to call it over at Steve Jackson Games? E23, there's Warehouse 23, which is there, but anyway, yeah. So it was available on a couple of different websites, and then when Vince and I started our company, which is called Snarling Badger Studios, the old company with me and Peter was Snarling Badger Games. We just took the Snarling Badger took the Snarling Badger Games stuff down on the Wargame Vault website, so it's not available anymore. The only two games we ever had out there were Zombie Rally, which was a card game, and then Metal Crushers, technically. So anyway, that's there we go. That's the BattleBots thing. Remember the good old con days? Used to hang a shingle at Historicon as a mini painter and sell a few minis while I was there. Couldn't even get in the front door today. Sure, yeah. Still have not tried GW's contrast paint. $11 a bottle plus tax means one bottle will change back from a 20. No thanks. I'd tell you to take a look at the Army Painter speed paints. If you can find, like, especially the newer ones, what they call the 2.0s, I think they're great. I've honestly switched over to pretty much only using those. I've not really been using contrast paints anymore these days. A big portion of that, the reasoning behind that, honestly, is the fact that I finally got one of those little fidget popper kind of silicone things. So they're like fidget toys for kids or whatever, and they look kind of like bubble wrap. So you push it down as a little cup and pop it back out. Using those, like you take a couple of drops of like wash in a dropper bottle, or, you know, speed paint in a dropper bottle, or anything like that, acrylic in a dropper bottle, instead of putting it on your wet palette, which is not great, and instead of putting it just on a piece of plastic, which is also not great, you just keep putting it on into these little cups in that little fidget popper thing. And then it makes a perfect little cup. You can mix in there and all that kind of stuff. And then once it dries, like the next day, you just go and just pop it out and throw away the paint, because it doesn't stick to the silicone, because like almost nothing sticks to silicone. So getting a couple of those and having those on my hobby desk all the time have been a total game changer. They have been just like, so just go to Google or whatever, just type in silicone fidget popper, and I'm sure you'll find it, or something like it. Your kids may have one if you're into that kind of thing or whatever, you know, the kids thing, I mean. But yeah, they are really, really, really excellent for using dropper bottles. Like, I never liked having washes in dropper bottles. I always wanted my washes in pots, like Citadel does. The problem is those pots suck. Like, over time, they get all kinds of paint in the lid, and then and they won't close properly anymore. Plus, if you knock over a dropper bottle, maybe a drop falls out. If you knock over a pot of Nuln oil, we've all seen those pictures on the internet. So, yeah, that's why I've really kind of switched over. Plus, I like the colors better from the Army Painter speed paints now. I've really started to like the Army Painter speed paint colors for all the different stuff they've got. I've been using Grim Black a lot. I've been using Occultist Robes. Anyway, on my guard, that's been the painting, the helmets and the shoulder pads and the armor, the chest plate and all that kind of stuff. It's all that color. It's a real dark, kind of desaturated blue that I like quite a bit. And I've been using their washes a ton nowadays, these days too. I like it because there are more of them. You've got dark, strong, light. There's also a mid. There's also a light, soft as what I meant to say. So it's like strong, no, dark, which is basically black, strong, which is basically brown, soft, which is basically sepia. But there's also then a mid and a light as well. So you've got even more shades within that kind of holy trinity, you know, from black to sepia. So I like that as well. Let's see here. Is the micro game in the zine called Adeptus Squirlicus? It is not. While I agree with you about Gen Con, nevertheless, the combined historical and non-historical miniatures games plus the miniatures hobby events combined would make a fair mini-con. Yeah, I mean, there's decent amount of mini stuff at Gen Con, but it is by far the much more expensive convention to go to, I would think. That's also a concern. Goodness, I'm way behind all of a sudden. Do you think there's more miniatures gaming at Gen Con or Origins? Probably Gen Con, not necessarily per capita, but just because there's so many people. You know what I mean? I would say probably Gen Con. There's a decent amount of, like, there was a lot of Star Wars stuff going on, Legion, Shatterpoint. I didn't see any X-Wing. I didn't look that hard, but I didn't see any X-Wing. But then there was also like a lot of Kings of War going on. There was a lot of Infinity. There was a decent amount of War Machine. There was also Malifaux, decent amount of Malifaux. So, like, in comparison to the rest of that convention, it's a very small part. But if you just took all that part, it's maybe not quite as much mini gaming as is going on at Adepticon, but it's still a pretty decent amount. Haven't seen these new Cities of Sigmar stuff, which is probably a good thing. Well, I understand that. GW rattle cans are pretty much the same as regular rattle cans. Yeah, except for the price. We signed up for an Old Gods game at Gen Con, and the dude running it canceled the last minute. Oh, that's a bummer. An RE Painter rattle can is like 13 euros, so much less than $25 to $30 from Games Workshop. Yeah, it's true. Montana Gold rattle cans are great and with an excessive color range. See, I don't ever see those anywhere. Are Montana Gold, isn't that aimed more towards the kind of like graffiti art type crowd? I've seen people like graffiti artists on YouTube, and I swear Montana Gold is the brand. And yeah, they've got zillions and zillions of colors. But I haven't seen anything around here. You know what I mean? Like I haven't, again, not a particularly big city. So there's that too. I'm 70 plus years old and just getting into Warhammer 40K. Well, there you go. I was a little trepidatious to start painting my minis. I'm nowhere near as good as what I see on YouTube. Well, no, I mean, especially if you just started, like, there's all kinds of things that if I just decided to start, like let's say I decided to start playing piano, I would not be as good as people who've been doing it for 30 years. That's just the way it works. You have to practice to get there. A big portion, however, at least within miniature painting, and I don't know about, you know, piano playing, but a big portion in miniature painting is technique. Like once you learn, like I've seen people look at like complete newbies, people who aren't even interested in painting, but they're looking at the miniatures you're showing them and they're like, how did you paint every single tiny little link on that guy's chainmail? That must have driven you insane. And I'd be like, no, it took literally 60 seconds because I dry brushed it on with a makeup brush. I painted the area black, let it dry, and then took some silver on my dry brush, went scrape, and then boom, done. And so knowing the techniques is what, at least at the beginning, allows you to take your stuff very quickly from being like, I don't know what I'm doing at all, to being like, well, this looks not so bad. Decent enough for tabletop, for sure. It's when you get into, I want to try to win big awards and at big conventions and things like that, then that's a much more rarefied air, and you have to really, yeah, that's a lot more into theory and to all kinds of things. But yeah, a lot of learning about these how to paint these models is knowing the tricks and the techniques, and that's the type of stuff that I try to teach here on the channel. And so do people like Vince and like, you know, Vince Venturella and all kinds of people like that. 52 minis, exactly. I watched your vids and I dug in. Thanks for giving me permission to start. Sure, absolutely. That is the idea of the channel, and I'm glad that it's helping you. Regular painters don't post their stuff on YouTube as a job. Professional painters do. Also true. Yeah, that's true. Your BattleBots game looks very nostalgic. Well, I mean, 1992 is the first one we did. We did 3 different editions. There was the original red edition cover. There was an edition that had like more of a tan cover, and then the last edition was a bluish cover. So that's how you keep them. You know, if you find one out in the wild to purchase, now you know what's first edition, second edition, third edition. Third edition is probably the nicest version. I'll be honest. And it wasn't even like we changed editions. It was just like we just redid the cover for the most part, and because we had to do a new printing, the insides kind of stayed the same for the most part. Army Painter Peachy Flesh has changed my elf game. Now to find a speed paint for Drukhari. Sure, I can see that. Should make a video about the silicone fidget popper things. That's a huge tip. Yeah, I keep meaning to do so. It's not a thing that I came up with. My friend Matt told me about it. He saw it someplace else online. So I feel like it would be a good idea for me to signal boost it, but I have to make completely sure in the comment or in the video, I didn't come up with this. I wish I had, but I didn't. It's just an awesome thing. I mean, it's just like the wet palette. I made that wet palette video. I didn't come up with a palette. That's somebody else told me about that, and they heard from somebody else, and you know they've been doing that for a long time. Army Painter is starting to name things with a color description. I'm so tired of trying to find a contrast speed paint based on a name. I know GWs, but the name is crazy. Yeah, I know what you mean. I think it's smart too. How's the Nurgle model going for Nova? It's going. I've been working on it. I've probably put 10 hours into it so far. I haven't started the metallics yet. I've been mainly working on the armor. I haven't started the base at all, which I'm gonna have to start doing real soon. But yeah, for sure. Well, folks, it's 11 a.m. over here in my neck of the woods, so it is time for me to wrap it up for the day. I want to thank everybody for coming by here on this Sunday morning. And I talked a little bit about Gen Con, talked a little bit about some stuff I brought back from Gen Con, but mainly just wanted to answer questions. That's always generally the main point of the show. So I'll be back here again next week. Sorry, not next week. In 2 weeks, right? Hang on. Yes. So in 2 weeks, we'll be back here again, and then I will be at Nova Open at the last weekend of the month. So I'll be at Nova Open from August 30th, 31st, the 1st, the 2nd, and the 3rd of September. So the 3rd of September will not be a show because, well, it wouldn't, now with the new schedule, it won't need to be. So the next show will be on the 27th, which will be just before I leave to go to Nova. So everything will be fine. No problems. All right. We've got that figured out. Thank you very much. So thanks for everybody for coming by and hanging out. And if you get the chance, hit the little like button down at the bottom. That'd be great. It's helpful for the video, and you get to see little tiny fireworks, which is also fun. So yeah, and subscribe if you haven't done that as well. I should probably start saying that more frequently. But yeah, have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.